Good morning, quilt people. How is everybody today? I'm really good. And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about gratitude and what I'm grateful for. And so today I am grateful for all of our fur babies, all four of them, all of whom are rescues that we can provide a good home for. And so that brings me a lot of joy knowing that little guys like this, right, Bridget, who needed a home, that we're able to care for them. So I'd love for you to post in the comments what you're grateful for today. And then, you know what I'm not grateful for? Oh my God, like the stress level that I've been living with lately, is just like, oh, constant cold sores and things like this, just, showing up on my body. Clearly, I'm a little stressed. But I'm also grateful for the opportunity to come in here every day and to, do this whole thing because it brings me a lot of joy, obviously. And to be able to feel like I'm contributing to your life, hopefully in some meaningful way, that maybe just a little bit I can bring some joy to your world. And, that brings me a lot of joy. Because I can just come in here and talk forever to nobody other than my phone. The quilt people live in my phone. Where are they? It's almost like I've been doing this my whole life, which I have been. When I was quite young, oh my gosh, I was chubby and bad haircut and no interest in sports, so not cool. And I was taking tap dance lessons down at the local dance studio in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. And that's where I learned how to be jazzy at the age of 10. That's when I first started training. And so, as a result, I didn't have a lot of friends. Well, like I had one friend in the whole world. And so, to kind of counter a lot of the bullying and stuff that I was experiencing at school, I would kind of, go into our basement and, I would do crafts and things like that. That's where these mice came from. If you're not familiar with, why I do these little guys, it's a little nod to that time in my life, and that's what I would do. That's one of the things I first learned how to make was these little felt mice, and so I'd have costumes for them, and they'd have like little professions, and they had like an entire identity. They were my friends, still are, which is totally fine. But, we come through difficult times like that and, hopefully better for it. Sometimes we only really understand the light once we have experienced darkness. So, what's on deck for today? Well, I wanted to, as much as I wanted to, start a new project. I want to finish up this one first. And so we're going to just review basic machine quilting from beginning to end. Now, I took that one, the Arkansas Crossroads, down off the wall. And so I'm going to show you what I'm doing step by step in order for like my process of actually quilting it on the machine. The first step that I do once I take it down off the wall is address the back, right? Because I haven't really seen the back up to this point. And so I will take a look at that and just kind of hand smooth it out, right? So that I get any wrinkles or bumps out the back, right? That sounded very Canadian, didn't it? Out the back. And then once I have all those bumps and lumps out of it, then I can feel more secure about moving forward. Okay? And the next step I'll do is turn it onto its front side, keeping it as taut as possible. And then do the same on this side, especially on the borders, getting all those bumps out. And then the next thing I'll do, which I already kind of started on, is grid it out, right? And so I will actually take whatever grid I have on this, whether it's the sashing, in this case it's the diagonals, right? And I will do stitches, right, to kind of just start to tack it down in a large grid format. Again, then once I've done that, I'll take it and look at it on the back again and make sure that with that large grid, I haven't sewn in any bumps. right? So I got to keep checking that because, you know, if it was on a long arm, there would be more tension on this. But because it's not on a long arm, you have to keep checking and make sure that you're not sewing in, you know, folds and bumps. So, all right, so that's the first thing that I'll do is essentially, and I'll show you here on this, all right, you see that? How I've started to make this large grid along, get these bumps out of there, right? Just to start to get it in place instead of, you know, a lot of people will use pins and things like that. So I'll just do that first large format gridding first, and then I'll be ready to start quilting it. Now, I use two different machines. I use my domestic for work like this that I just showed you. When you're doing this, make sure that you're using a walking foot, right? Because again, you want the top and the bottom being fed through at the same time. Again, if you do a long run, like we were talking about, you know, adding the borders, or was it, no, it was the back, if you don't do that, you will end up with a bit of a problem because the bottom keeps getting pulled through faster than the top. So in order to, have you ever got that where it kind of starts to skew a little bit because it hasn't done that, you know, it hasn't pulled them both through at the same time? That can be a problem. So watch out for that. And so now that I've done the large grid work in terms of just kind of getting it tacked into place so that I can start to work on the more fine quilting of it, then I'll take it to my mid-arm where I do the majority of my machine quilting. Okay, if you don't have a mid-arm, hopefully some of these techniques that I use you can use on your domestic as well, especially if you have a large format table that goes along with it for easier quilting. Oh yeah. All right, this is the original Arkansas Crossroads that I did way back like 20 years ago. And I've always loved it since, but I wanted to take a look at where I'm heading in terms of what the quilting is. And so we're going to take a close-up look of this, and also apparently a close-up look of my face. Oh my God, my lip. Life, what are you going to do, right? But I wanted to show you this here in terms of the way that I had it quilted, because back then I didn't know how to do my own quilting, right? But I really like the end effect, because I did kind of call it out in terms of what I wanted the long arm quilter to do. She did a great job, by the way. So there's a line along each one, right, on the sides, and then another line in the middle, and each one is kind of cross-hatched, right? You can pointing in the direction. Hello, see this up here? No, you can't. So let's look at this a little bit closer, right? So there's right, down the diagonal, there's a line, and then there's a line through the diagonal, and then there's another, you know, one on the other side of it, right? So each one of these diagonal lines has 3 lines of quilting, right? So you have one on either side, one in the middle, and then all of these blocks essentially just get cross-hatched. In the 16 patch, each one is cross-hatched with each diagonal allowing for this to come in as well. So I'm going to take a photo of that, kind of splice it in here so you can see it even closer up. But I wanted to kind of point in the direction that we're heading for. Always, 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 I like to draw it out on paper just to make sure that I understand fully kind of where I'm heading with the quilting itself. Don't just leave it up to, you know, whatever, unless, of course, you send it out. Then, obviously, the long arm person is probably going to want to have some input because you might come up with something totally crazy that they're not going to want to do. So that should be collaborative. So that's kind of where I'm heading with the quilting, with the exception of they did a small stipple right here in the light gray. I'm probably going to do lines. I really love just a simple line. I think it's super effective. I want to show you that other quilt, but I don't know what I did with it. Let me see if I can grab it. All right, so this is my Star Bright Nights pattern that was just recently in a magazine, and I loved the way that just using these simple lines really made it kind of even more modern. So that's one of my favorite techniques for doing quilting on my mid-arm machine. I think it's super effective, very modern, and it's not that difficult. So win-win. All right, since I actually did a video tutorial on my mid-arm before, I'm going to try and do more of this on this machine, just the regular domestic. Now, thread selection is one of the most important things that you can kind of contemplate as you're moving forward. I always go with anything that's just slightly darker than it needs to be, as it won't be quite as obvious when you're working in, multicolors. Also, when I'm working in multicolors, I tend to go with a beige or brown or gray, as those tend to be, I don't know, they kind of blend into the most colors, at least for me. This one I'm doing a brown up top and then kind of an orange or dark orange on the backside that kind of blends into this yellow quite nicely. So that's what I'm doing here. And then, let me just get this going the right way. So that's thread selection. And then, so I have my walking foot on here, right? And so I'm ready to get started. And it's really keeping it as flat as possible. I feel a little bit more confident that I've already done the first run, right? And if at all possible, do your second run going the opposite direction, right? It's just so that it doesn't continue to skew, but it kind of, the other run coming back kind of squares it back up. So let's see what we got going on here. And this part, right, on this side, I always kind of fold flat so that it can move in this direction. Then the second part, beyond just thread selection, is tension. Don't ever take that for granted. Oh my gosh, that is the fastest way to ruin a quilt that I know of. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. One of the main keys to getting your tension right is having the same gauge of thread on top as on bottom. If you're really struggling and you can't get the tension right, check that. I can't tell you how many times I've inadvertently put a really lightweight thread on one and the heavier gauge on the other, and it's so difficult to get tension right when you have two different weights of thread. It's funny, I was talking to a thread company and they were like, ooh, and we have this one in whisper weight. I was like, do you have anything it's not going to break off in my machine weight? That's all I care about. Just one gauge. I just want one kind that's going to do everything. I don't need like super fine or super thick or anything. I just get so tired of it like constantly breaking off in my machine, especially my mid-arm, because it puts so much tension on the thread. And oh my gosh, when they just pull apart like every 10 seconds, makes me crazy. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be focusing on here with this, right? Same weight of thread up top as on the bottom. I hopefully have this taken care of. Let's see. Okay, that's looking good. And we're ready to start trucking. All right, that's looking good. And then just keep folding this part over. Now, when I'm doing more free motion, I will wear gloves that have kind of sticky pads on the bottom, but if I'm just doing a straight run, especially if I have the walking foot, which really helps feed it through quite economically, then I won't. And to just give you a little bit of a close-up here, in case you're not doing this, this is helpful. All right, so I have the thread here, the top thread. I drop the needle down and then bring it back up. It catches the bobbin thread, which I can then pull through. All right, find the end of it. There it is. And then now I have both threads on top. Okay, and so I can start from there without getting a bunch of threads on the backside that's not attractive. It can also cause a problem. The other thing to be mindful of is as you're rolling this, right, to keep this square to go through the throat of it, that you're also pulling this side up onto the table, right? The last thing you want is additional tension on your needle by either side pulling this way. So you're constantly rolling this, putting it through, while you're also doing the same thing on the other side, but I'm just not rolling as much, I'm just pulling it up onto the table, okay? That's why when I'm like, when I first started, I'm like, really? All these little old ladies are doing this? Like, it takes a lot of shoulder muscle in order to work with some of these, especially when you're doing a bigger project. Like when someone asked me to do a king size quilt, I'm like, it's so much material to try and like get under a stationary needle. And all my machines are a stationary needle. I have nothing that's automated. My shoulders are automated. That's about it. So when I'm going from one to the next part of the grid, right, I will pull this all back towards me, right, and then set it up for the next one, folding this. This actually gets easier and easier the more you roll it. However, once you get past center, it becomes a bit more of a heavy problem. So, and then I'm going to get all set up here and pull that bobbin thread up through. Okay, there we go. Get ready to kind of back stitch it just a second. Kind of lock that in. All right, and this is what I do. Just this is to watch my arms in case this is helpful for you if you haven't done it before. All right. So while I have my hands on the table, I am creating tension this way, right, to kind of spread the material out and avoid any puckers, gathers, pleats, whatever, and to keep the material as taut as possible. And that's basically what it looks like in order to push the whole thing through. I just ran out of bobbin thread, so I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of look at the back and see how we're doing here. I'm just making sure that everything is laying as flat as possible. And so far, so good. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to continue on with the front side. So on the front, there, and I wanted to show you this specifically, there's a little spot right here where it's starting to twist like that. It's just the slightest bit, but I can see it there. And so when I come back through here, I'm gonna push the fabric and pull it apart like this, right? Just to kind of counter that as I come through here to try and because what it'll do, the thread on the backside will kind of readjust it and kind of counter that. So just be mindful of that. I always check on the front, see how I'm doing, right? See, same here. Can you see this? Let's bring that. See how this is too far to one side, right? So when I'm doing the lines the opposite way, again, I'll kind of try and pull it apart and flatten it out the best I can to oppose that movement that's kind of happening right now, where it's all kind of going like this with these 3 lines of sewing, right? So just be mindful of that. It will happen, but you can counter it. This is starting to grid out quite nicely. I'm very pleased with the result of it. You may have seen my light in the corner there. If you have kind of a dark corner that you're sewing in like I do here, where all the light is coming from the front, I just put a light there that kind of bounces off the back to kind of balance the light while I'm working. But you can see that this is starting to grid out, take shape, give life. This is always my favorite part when the quilting starts to kind of make the whole rest of it pop and give it some life. All right. So I'm going to leave this for now and come back to it later. But I wanted to leave you with one thought. When we started talking about gratitude, I thought about my favorite saying in regard to that is that if the only prayer that you can say today is thank you, it will be enough. Have a good day.